There's a peculiar reality regarding individuals who find solace alone. They weren't simply created that way, instinctively at ease, fading away from the public or selecting a vacant space. Most assume this is just being an introvert, but the actual explanation is far more profound. This inclination isn't just a personality quirk. It is a mechanism for survival, a behavioral blueprint taking root very early on. It stems from a specific type of upbringing, instructing them to look inward before reaching out. As time passes, being solitary no longer feels lonely. It evolves into their most secure refuge. What childhood experiences transform solitude into armor? Welcome back to Nori. We will analyze 6 obscured psychological markers from childhood that clarify why some feel protected alone, more than in the company of others. Stay tuned. You might discover the quiet you maintain carries a totally different significance. Trace 1. Insecure attachment. When a youngster feels frightened, their natural impulse is to rush to their protector. In a healthy setting, the adult welcomes them and provides solace. When this reassurance occurs reliably, the child's mind develops a conviction. The world is a secure place. People are dependable. But what occurs when that rhythm is interrupted? What if the adult's behavior becomes erratic? Your youth was spent in a state of doubt. On certain days, your parents were bright, affectionate, cherished you. Other days, they turned aloof, distant, irritable, or tuned you out. Yesterday, knocking over a drink was a minor mishap. Today, that same event triggers a massive emotional eruption. You never knew which version of the parent you would encounter, forced to constantly monitor the adult's expressions. When this environment persists, your brain reaches a verdict. Connection is a gamble. This is identified as an insecure attachment style. When affection is tied to volatility, you lose the drive to seek others. You start to withdraw, not out of hatred, but because placing confidence in someone unpredictable feels too hazardous. As you mature, this dictates every relationship. You might talk effectively and perform well at work, but internally, you always maintain a hidden gap. You establish a silent perimeter no one can breach, and feel most settled when by yourself. Why is that? Predictability. Solitude doesn't change its temperament. It never fails to keep its word. When alone, you are in total command. That quietness isn't flight, but the sole consistency. Trace 2. Invisible emotions. Some wounds from youth don't involve physical strikes. They are far more subtle, arising from voids, from a lack of being understood. This is childhood emotional neglect, or CEN. CEN isn't about actions adults took against you, but about the actions they failed to take. Your household might have been prosperous. To an outsider, you had an ideal upbringing. But in the realm of feelings, you were an orphan. When you wept, adults dismissed it. You're crying over that? Knock it off. When you described anxieties, met with a wave of the hand. When you achieved something great, all you received was a distracted nod. Where feelings were real, but never truly perceived. So, what is the outcome? A child abandons their own requirements. Eventually, your brain decides to flip off the expression toggle. You stop explaining yourself. Stop weeping in front of others. Stop anticipating someone will listen and genuinely care. Every feeling must be processed internally. When stress hits, your impulse is to retreat. You lock your door, dissect the issue alone. Sit with the hurt alone, devise a strategy, alone. Even when asked, your reflexive reply is always, "I'm fine." Observers might label you as detached or prideful, but they are unaware you pull away because of a painful truth. When you brought your inner world into the light, all you received was apathy. For you, being solitary means no one can invalidate your experience. In that still space, you are permitted to be fragile, without needing to justify yourself to anyone. Trace 3. Compelled to become emotionally self-sufficient too soon. Contemporary culture celebrates independence, viewed as a magnificent trait, a sign of maturity. But for many, their self-reliance isn't a trophy. It is a mark of trauma. It doesn't arise from preference, but from harsh necessity. This is parentification or role reversal, a child forced to inhabit the role of an adult too soon. Perhaps your family was struggling or guardians overworked. Maybe a parent was emotionally unstable, sick, or there was perpetual fighting. In that absence of guidance, you were subtly pushed into the fixer role. You had to look after your siblings, soothe yourself when upset, manage situations a youngster should never have faced. And the most difficult part is adults complimented you. So responsible, self-reliant at such a young age. That praise inadvertently became a cage. My worth depends on not being a burden. I am not allowed to require assistance. Asking others for help is an imposition. This forced self-reliance transforms into hyper-independence. You are fantastic at your job, navigate life flawlessly, but beneath that sturdy exterior is a profound dread of needing anyone. You'd rather work all night than request aid. Asking involves the danger of being turned down, or the danger someone else will ruin things. Being alone offers authority and total safety. When you don't rely on anyone, no one can let you down. The silent room is where you can remove the flawless mask and simply exist. Trace 4. An overstimulating home environment. Home is supposed to be the ultimate sanctuary. However, for you it was where your senses were severely taxed. If you grew up in a household always crowded, lacking personal space, or constantly drowned in noise, TV blaring, adults shouting, fierce arguments, your brain had to adapt to block out the commotion. You held your breath, tracking every footfall, and winced at the sound of doors being slammed. That high-stress environment reconfigured your nervous system, keeping it in perpetual high alert, depleting energy rapidly. This explains why you feel exhausted so quickly after social interactions. Being in a crowd feels like a direct assault. People suggest, go out and socialize. They fail to realize that for you, going out isn't a release. It is a drain. Chaotic noises trigger the same stress response. The empty room isn't a place to hide. It is a biological recharging station. Being alone means no more racket, no more external pressure. Total silence is the only remedy. Your pulse slows down, muscles loosen, thoughts stabilize. For you, solitude is a biological requirement for survival. Trace 5. A highly empathic nature, or HSP. This inclination for being alone comes from your inherent biological makeup. This concept is known as HSP, or the highly sensitive person. If a typical person perceives life in standard resolution, an HSP child perceives the world in ultra-high definition. You don't just hear a noise, you feel its vibration. You are like a sponge, soaking up emotional energy. Even when no one uttered a word, you felt the thick tension. Your chest felt tight when you saw a peer crying, or incredibly uncomfortable in a room full of forced smiles. Lacking a protective barrier, you unknowingly carried negative vibes. If you grew up in a setting that lacked empathy, you were constantly dismissed as weak, a crybaby, or overly sensitive. To survive the deluge of feelings, an HSP child has one defense: limit contact and intentionally create protective bubbles of isolation. This leads to a very frequent pattern in your adult life. You might be a great communicator, immense empathy, a fantastic anchor. But immediately afterward, you crash into social exhaustion. You feel a desperate urge to vanish instantly. You isolate yourself not because you dislike people, but because your internal hard drive has reached 100% capacity. After soaking up too much external data, solitude becomes a ritual of emotional detoxification. It helps you squeeze out your sponge, reestablish borders, and safeguard the integrity of your mind. Trace 6. Transactional affection, or conditional love. Recall, was your youth always filled with accolades? Top-tier student, perfectly behaved child, pride of your family. To outsiders, you seemed like the ideal child. But deep inside, your brain recorded a harsh lesson. Love isn't something given for free. It is a business deal. Adults only beamed when you brought home top grades, only hugged you when you acted flawlessly in front of company. The second you failed, slipped up, or showed vulnerability, that warmth vanished, replaced by sighs of disappointment or chilling silence. Affection came with one fundamental requirement. You had to always be exceptional, or at least useful. What is the consequence? Chronic, people-pleasing habits. The presence of others is synonymous with a stage performance. You automatically activate your performance mode. Tighten up to scan for what they need, anticipate what they want, and force yourself to inhabit a perfect persona. So no one will criticize or abandon you. And that is why you long to be alone. Being alone isn't about hating people. It is the only time you are permitted to step off stage. The vacant room is where you can shut down the performance. In that quiet, no one expects you to be flawless. No one withdraws their love because you are weary. You are allowed to inhale, to be disorganized, to simply exist. When we look at all 6 markers together, insecure attachment, ignored emotions, forced self-reliance, sensory overload, high sensitivity, and transactional love, a completely different image begins to take shape. It shatters the labels of introverted or unapproachable. You weren't born wanting to keep the world at a distance. You adjusted because being alone offered absolute security. Safer than being ignored, misunderstood, or let down. Your mind did something remarkably clever. It protected you. And that is something you should recognize within yourself. There is nothing fundamentally wrong with you. You aren't broken. You haven't lost the capacity to care or connect. You are simply someone who had to survive emotionally, without any safety net other than your own strength. That level of independence requires incredible resilience. But here is the trade-off. The shield that once guarded you now prevents good things. When you construct a life where you don't need anyone, you inadvertently eliminate opportunity for genuine people. When you bolt the door shut to keep out the gales, you may also end up shutting out the sunlight. The most vital question isn't, why do I enjoy being alone? The real question, am I choosing or defaulting to alone? These 2 concepts lead to very different existences. Choice provides liberty, tranquility, and agency. Default is a programmed reaction, happening automatically without thought. frequently fueled by old fears. The goal isn't to instruct you to immediately throw open windows. Sprint into the street and become best friends with everyone. Quietude is still a magnificent gift for you. It's where you refuel, gain perspective, and feel authentic. That doesn't need to change. Your profound need for silence was a brilliant adaptation to an unpredictable early environment. It became the safest way to find stability when the world around you felt overwhelming. You never have to apologize for craving an empty room or a peaceful evening alone. You are simply stepping out of the belief that solitude is your only safe harbor. When you seek isolation today, is it to recharge your spirit or to hide from connection? If this resonated with you, share a sentence in the comments where you will be heard. May your quietest moments always be a gentle choice rather than a lonely fortress.